Footsteps in the Rain. That's the title of this one. Hi Steve, my name is Luke. Feel free to say my name. I'm a new viewer of the channel. I happened to stumble upon it while doing some research for a potential fictional story. I always found the idea of a race of people like Sasquatches in a fantasy prehistoric setting quite fascinating. However, this isn't what I'm writing you about. I actually have my own encounter that I honestly don't know what to make of. You see, I'm a person that doesn't believe in ghost stories or anything that comes off as pseudoscience. And my own perspective and my own religious beliefs, I just find that every hokey and I just find that very hokey and kind of implausible. Before I lose your attention, I have to emphasize that I do not criticize those that have beliefs vastly different from mine. It's better to believe in something rather than nothing at all. With that said, I must get to the main story. Forgive me if it tends to be a little dramatic. I love writing stories, and that just tends to come out. But this story is something that I never really knew how to tell in a way that didn't make me seem crazy until now. My story begins about 9 years ago in February 2013. I was a sophomore in high school and lived in Tucson, Arizona. As far as cities go, it doesn't get any worse than that in my opinion. Around this time, I was also part of the Boy Scouts of America, and I was currently working on getting the Scout rank of Life, which is just below the Holy Grail rank of Eagle. To get this, I was holding a high leadership position within my Scout troop. We all wanted to go on a backpacking trip and had been planning on it for a few months. Our destination was Mount Wrightston, which is just south of Tucson, and large enough that the peaks are visible in the hazy blue distance. We all planned about 2 routes for 2 teams, Team A and Team B, and I was leading Team B. Team A's route was to hike up to the saddle of the mountains, take a left, hike up to Wrightston's Peak, and come up there. Team B's plan was to hike up the second saddle, camp there for the night. Just to make it clear, I was pretty chubby at the time, despite having weight training classes in high school that slowly burned the fat off my body like how holy water burns away sin. But our destination of camping in the saddle was fine by me. Hell, this is both exciting and terrifying because this is my very first backpacking trip, and I was responsible for 3 other boys younger than me, even though I had 3 adults in my team. Now pay attention, as this is where some important details add to both the experience and confusion of the story. The 3 adults, whom I'll only refer to as James, David, and Conger, feel free to say these names, were the fun adult troop leaders. They liked to goof off and make jokes all the time, especially David and James. So I knew that my group was going to be fun. It'd be a great learning experience too, because James is Eagle Scout alumni. Well, we get to the gear. Well, now we get to the gear. Everyone else had gear for the trip. Well, I didn't. My family was never able to afford much, and I couldn't get the right backpacking gear I needed outside of the pack itself. Because of this, I ended up borrowing a tent and a couple other pieces of gear from one of the Scout Masters. The tent I ended up getting was fairly used, but still great condition, except for this one little thing. At some point in time, one of the tent rods broke or was cracking, and someone repaired it with duct tape. This meant that the sleeve of the tent canopy couldn't go down all the way, and left a portion of the mesh windows exposed in a single area of the tent. Keep this in mind, it is important for later. So now, February arrives, and we all meet up early in the morning and drive off to Madura Canyon, where Mount Wrightston sits in stone-cold silence. The area is beautiful and was very different from the desert rural city Frankenstein of a place Tucson actually is. It was cloudy around the mountain, which is an important detail for later, and the woods brought green to my forever beige and brown sun-soaked world. Makes you wonder if I'll start bitching about sand at some point. Anyways, we pull up to the trail entrance and park. All of us get our gear out, organize into our teams, and off we go. Of course, Team A went up first, and shortly after Team B followed in suit. The hike up to the saddle was very different from my other outdoors experiences, but at the same time, it was very adventurous. Along this trail, we obviously kept a good eye out, as it was both bear and mountain lion country. If anything, I was more afraid of the bears. The hours ticked by, and finally arrived at the saddle of the mountain. It was green and fresh and perfect. We took off to the right to a slope, so we weren't directly on the trail and we'd get in the way of other hikers. During this time, we set up our tents on the slope. Myself and the other 3 boys set up 2 tents, 2 in each tent, while David and Conger set up their tents a little bit above us on the slope, and James set up his at the base of the slope. Overall, every tent was within view of mine, and each tent sound was drowned out by the birds and gentle breeze that shook the pine trees. More time passes as we get our dinner made. Set up the bear bag a good distance away, and off to bed we go. I shared a tent with a scrawny young guy named Dylan. It's safe to assume that you can say all these names. I didn't want him sleeping on the side that had the mesh uncovered by the tent canopy, so I volunteered to make that my spot. As night crept in and the clouds began to reflect on the lights of the city, the forest took to a slightly illuminated state, dew. I think you know what I mean, as it is the light pollution that reflects off of storm clouds at night and illuminates the area just enough. Well, I start to fall asleep. Pit-pat, pit-pat. I open my eyes. It started to drizzle. It's cold outside. I'm at a real high elevation. My face is under the exposed part of the mesh and it starts to rain. Great. I choose this spot and I'll just have to deal with it. I close my eyes and I fall back to sleep. I woke up again, probably 30 minutes later. This is a very rough estimate. At this point in my life, my sleep issues started to arise, and falling asleep after being woken up is tough, especially after it rains and soaks your pillow and sleeping bag from the shoulders up. Oh my God, that sucks. I'm wet and cold and I start to go back to sleep, and then it started. I'm trying to fall asleep again, and somewhere from behind my tent, something is walking. It's very clearly sounded bipedal. Of course, my mind was thinking it was a deer or a friggin' bear. I basically was terrified and tried to make as little noise as I could. I breathed out slowly and quietly from my mouth, but this thing kept coming. It walked and walked as the pine needles and the occasional twig snapped underfoot, and it walked right past my tent, up the hill and beyond. I didn't look up or anything. I was too scared. As it was at this point, I noticed everything was really quiet, like too quiet, and it wasn't even drizzling anymore. It was so quiet, I could hear this thing walk over to the other side of the hill and out of range. In my fear, I pulled out my pocket knife, opened it, and hid it beside me just in case, and then tried to go to sleep. Pit-pat, pit-pat. I woke up again. The rain is back, and I'm thinking, oh great. My face is wetter and colder, and the water's running down and collecting at the end of my tent, of the tent my feet are at. Lovely. I curl up a bit and try to go to sleep. I must have been asleep for a little bit, but I woke up again and the rain was gone and the silence returned. I didn't think much of it, but then the steps come back. They came back from the direction they left earlier, and over the side of the slope and down towards my tent, and I was petrified. I wanted to get the hell out, but I froze. I didn't look up, and instead just looked at the wall of the tent and didn't face Dylan. Dylan, surprisingly, was passed out this whole time. He never woke up at all, but that didn't stop the steps. They kept coming back at the same path they took, which was right past the tent. These heavy bipedal steps, pine needles crunching wetly underfoot with a couple of twig snaps. They walked and walked and walked, and then stopped. They stopped just outside the tent, on the side my head and Dylan's head were. I was terrified. And I'm feeling that same feeling as I retell this. I didn't know what was going to happen next. I just stared at the wall. Then the most terrifyingly confusing thing happened. Something slid underneath the tent and under my pillow. Then it gently raised my head several inches off the ground. It was slow and gentle, and it held my pillowed head for several seconds. Holy shit. Let me tell you, those were the longest several seconds of my entire life. But my head felt something underneath the pillow like large fingers. Afterwards, my head was gently laid back on the ground. Like how do you pick up an animal and put it down on the ground with such care? After that, the hand or whatever slid up from underneath the tent and then walked back behind it and away out of the audible view. I was scared but very perplexed. I tried to fall back asleep and succeeded. Morning came and we cooked breakfast. As we're cooking breakfast, I asked aloud everyone if they heard something last night. Everyone said they didn't hear anything except for James. James said he heard something walk through the campsite, but that was it. I decided to keep it to myself. After we ate, we packed up, and as I packed up my wet sleeping bag and pad, I discovered a granola bar wrapper under my sleeping pad. This is definitely an oh shit moment because I thought I grabbed all the trash. Turns out I didn't, and it further muddied what happened to me just mere hours ago. We hiked down to the trail entrance that morning. Lots of hikers of all walks of life passed us on their way up. It was a fun trip and one of my favorite memories from my scouting days. Well, we got to the entrance and hop in the cars and leave. We all head back to our original meeting location in Tucson. My dad picks me up. On our drive home, he asked me about it, and I decided to tell him everything, including the encounter during the night. My dad was quick to shoot me down. He said it was one of those adults in my crew, as I had the practical jokers, especially David and James. I chewed on that for a minute, and I told him it wasn't possible. James did say he heard something that night, but if it was them, I would have heard them walk to their tents as well as open and close them with the zipper. Yet my dad still said it was most likely them. Maybe. But it was doubtful, especially since the closest adult to my tent was James, and he was below me, not behind me. I stopped there and kept quiet the rest of the drive home. Ever since, I rarely told the story and was reluctant to tell it to my wife, fearing she would think me for some crazy guy. Well, she listened and was rather intrigued to say the least, and that was reassuring. Overall, I want to share this with you and with everyone. What I'm most interested in, Steve, is what you have to say. With all your years of outdoor experiences, have you ever had a situation where something lifted your head or a tent gently and placed it down, or just anything like that? I just know that whatever it was very heavy, and I didn't leave any prints or clear walkways aside from a few broken twigs. This has been on my mind for 9 years. I just want to have some help to find me an answer. Sasquatch or not, whatever it was very real. It'll be something I'll never forget. And as a message to all you viewers, Steve, thank you for all your stories and your own personal points of view. They actually encourage me to tell my own experience. And should I ever have another one, I'll come back and share. Experiences are just histories in the making, and legends forever immortal. And as for you, Steve, keep up the great work. I greatly appreciate your content and your own perspective on things. Also, Canada looks beautiful, and is somewhere I wished I could visit just once in my lifetime. Maybe even have my own little Jack London-style adventure. You really do bring that wilderness to life with the footage you shoot and on location discussions. I do have a request to hear more should-have-been-dead stories you have from all your years as a guide. Those are just really cool and very different from what I get over here in the States. Thanks. Luke. All right, Luke, thanks for your share, man.